What would you do if you had less than 20 minutes to save 200 innocent lives? What if every rule you'd ever learned, every protocol you'd memorized, every safe procedure you'd practiced for years suddenly became useless? What if the only way forward was to throw out the book entirely and trust your instincts in the most dangerous 18 minutes of your life? This isn't a movie. This isn't fiction. This is the true story of Sarah Chun, a 29-year-old bomb disposal expert who faced an impossible choice on a Tuesday morning that started like any other. In 18 minutes, she would either become a hero or join the victims she was trying to save. The clock was already ticking, and conventional wisdom was about to become her enemy. Sarah Chun was sipping her second cup of coffee when her phone screamed to life at 7:42 a.m. The shrill emergency tone cut through the quiet morning air like a knife, instantly flooding her system with adrenaline. She had been a bomb technician for the Metropolitan Police Explosive Ordnance Disposal Unit for 6 years, and that sound never failed to make her heart race. "Chun here," she answered, already reaching for her gear bag with her free hand. "Sarah, we need you downtown immediately," came the urgent voice of her supervisor, Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez. Jefferson Elementary School. Possible explosive device. 200 kids and staff inside. Her coffee mug hit the table harder than intended, sending droplets across her kitchen counter. Details. Anonymous tip came in 20 minutes ago. Caller claimed there's a device in the main building set to detonate during morning assembly. We've got the building surrounded, but we can't evacuate without potentially triggering panic or the device itself. Sarah was already moving, grabbing her tactical vest from the hallway closet. Time frame. Unknown. The caller said before 9 a.m. That gives us maybe 70 minutes. But, Sarah, Rodriguez's voice carried a weight that made her pause in her preparations. There's something else. The caller specifically asked for you by name. The words hit her like ice water. In 6 years of bomb disposal, no one had ever requested her specifically. Anonymous tips were common, but this level of detail, this personal touch, it felt different. Wrong. Asked for me? What exactly did they say? Quote, tell Sarah Chun she has 18 minutes once she arrives. No more, no less. She'll understand why when she sees it. Sarah's hands stilled on her equipment bag. 18 minutes. That number meant something, but she couldn't place it immediately. Her mind raced through previous cases, training scenarios, anything that might connect to that specific time frame. Sarah? You there? Yeah, I'm here. Any description of the device? Negative. Just that it's in the building, and you'll know it when you see it. ETA. Sarah glanced at her watch. Rush hour traffic would normally take 30 minutes to get downtown, but with emergency protocols, she could cut that in half. 15 minutes. Good. Sarah, I don't like this. Someone specifically requesting you, giving exact time frames. It feels personal. She slung her gear bag over her shoulder and headed for the door. I know, but 200 people don't get to pay for whatever game someone's playing. The drive to Jefferson Elementary was a blur of sirens and flashing lights. Sarah's mind worked methodically through possibilities as she weaved through traffic that parted like water before her emergency vehicle. Anonymous tips usually came from someone close to the situation, someone with insider knowledge. But requesting her specifically suggested this wasn't random. As she pulled up to the school, the scene was controlled chaos. Police barriers held back concerned parents who had heard about the lockdown. News vans were already setting up across the street, their satellite dishes reaching toward a sky that seemed too bright for such a dark situation. The school itself looked deceptively normal, red brick and cheerful playground equipment belying the terror that waited inside. Lieutenant Rodriguez met her at the barrier, his face grim. Building's been sealed for 20 minutes. We've got eyes on all exits, but no movement in or out since the call came in. What about communication with inside? Principal Hayes has her office line open. She's managed to keep the kids calm by telling them it's an extended morning assembly. But, Sarah, that assembly was supposed to end 10 minutes ago. They're going to start getting restless soon. Sarah pulled on her protective gear, the familiar weight of the bomb suit oddly comforting despite the circumstances. Any visual on the device? That's the thing. We've had thermal imaging and cameras sweep the main assembly hall, the cafeteria, everywhere we can see. Nothing obvious. If there's a device, It's either very well hidden or somewhere we can't see. She checked her equipment one final time. Wire cutters, electronic multimeter, digital camera, disruptor tools, and her personal lucky charm, a small flashlight her father had given her when she first started the job. I'm going in. Sarah, wait. Rodriguez grabbed her arm gently. I've been thinking about this. Someone asking for you specifically, giving exact time frames. Do you have any idea who might want to target you? She had been wondering the same thing. In 6 years, she had successfully disarmed dozens of devices. She had testified in court cases, putting bomb makers behind bars. She had made enemies, certainly, but none who should have known her personal work patterns or had enough detail to set up something this elaborate. I've got some ideas, but nothing concrete. Right now, those kids are what matter. As she approached the school's main entrance, her radio crackled to life. Chun, this is Principal Hayes inside. Can you hear me? Loud and clear, Principal. How are the children holding up? They think this is some kind of special safety drill. I've got teachers keeping them engaged with quiet activities, but some of the older kids are starting to ask questions. How much time do you need? Sarah looked at her watch. It had been 28 minutes since the initial call. If the 18-minute time frame started when she arrived, she was already burning precious seconds. I'll work as fast as I can. Keep them calm and keep them together. Don't let anyone leave the assembly hall until I give the all clear. The school's main hallway was eerily quiet as she entered. Her footsteps echoed off the polished linoleum floors, and the cheerful children's artwork on the walls seemed to mock the gravity of the situation. Somewhere in this building was a device that could end 200 lives. Somewhere in this maze of classrooms and corridors was a bomb designed specifically for her to find. She moved methodically, scanner in hand, checking each classroom as she passed. The device could be anywhere. In a locker, taped under a desk, hidden in a supply closet, placed in the ventilation system. The possibilities were endless, and 18 minutes was nowhere near enough time to search the entire building properly. But then, she remembered the caller's words. She'll understand why when she sees it. This wasn't about hiding a device, so well she'd never find it. This was about placing it somewhere meaningful, somewhere that would tell a story. Sarah paused in the hallway, forcing herself to think like the bomber. Why this school? Why her specifically? Why 18 minutes? And then it hit her. 18 minutes. She knew that number after all. 3 years ago, she had responded to a call at a downtown office building. A disgruntled former employee had placed a device in his old workplace, set to detonate during the morning staff meeting. Sarah had found the bomb with 19 minutes to spare, but the disarming process had taken 18 minutes of careful, methodical work. She had saved 43 people that day. The bomber's name was David Morrison, and he had sworn during his trial that she would pay for ruining his revenge. He had been sentenced to 15 years, but had been released early on good behavior just 6 months ago. Rodriguez, I need you to check on David Morrison. Released from Millfield Correctional 6 months ago. This is about the Hartley building case from 3 years back. Copy that. I'll get someone on it immediately. Sarah quickened her pace, heading toward the school's main office. If Morrison was behind this, he would want her to understand the connection. He would want her to remember that case, to relive those 18 minutes when she had defeated him. The device wouldn't be hidden randomly. It would be somewhere symbolic. The main office was empty, but as she entered, she saw it immediately. On the principal's desk, positioned perfectly in the center, was a manila envelope with her name written across it in neat block letters. Her blood ran cold. Inside the envelope was a single photograph and a handwritten note. The photograph showed the Hartley building from 3 years ago, the exact angle she would have seen as she entered to disarm Morrison's first device. The note was brief, but chilling. You cost me everything, Sarah. My job, my freedom, my family. Now you have 18 minutes to save these children, just like you had 18 minutes to save those people who destroyed my life. But this time, I've made it impossible. The device is motion-activated and connected to the school's main electrical system. Cut the power, and it detonates. Move it, and it detonates. The only way to disarm it is to follow the same procedure you used 3 years ago, but I've made one small change. This time, there's no manual override. This time, you have to choose, follow protocol, and watch everyone die, or break every rule you've ever learned and maybe, just maybe, save them. Clock starts now. Sarah looked at her watch. 8:23 a.m. 18 minutes would take her to 8:41. Morning assembly was scheduled to end at 8:45, when 200 people would disperse throughout the building, making evacuation nearly impossible if the device was still active. She keyed her radio. Rodriguez, I found the message. It's Morrison, and this is personal. The device is somewhere in this building, motion-activated and tied to the electrical system. I need building schematics immediately, and get me Morrison's file from the Hartley case. I need to remember exactly what I did 3 years ago. Copy that. Sarah, we can evacuate. We can get everyone out through the emergency exits. Negative. If it's motion-activated and tied to the electrical system like he says, an evacuation could trigger it. 200 people moving at once would create enough vibration to set off any sensitive trigger mechanism. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, forcing herself to remember the Hartley building. Morrison had been methodical then, placing his device in the building's main electrical panel. He had been an electrician before his termination, and he understood building systems better than most. Rodriguez, where's the main electrical panel for Jefferson Elementary? Checking the schematics now. Basement level, northwest corner. But, Sarah, if it's tied to the electrical system like he claims, shutting off power could trigger the device. Or it could be a bluff. Morrison's smart, but he's not an expert bomb maker. He's an electrician with a grudge and 6 months to plan revenge. Sarah made her way toward the basement, every step measured and careful. If the device was truly motion-activated, sudden movements or vibrations could set it off prematurely. The basement was darker than the main floors, lit only by emergency lighting that cast strange shadows on the concrete walls. The electrical panel was exactly where the schematics indicated, a large gray metal box humming with the power that kept the school running. And there, mounted on top of the panel with mechanical precision, was Morrison's device. It was bigger than she had expected, roughly the size of a shoebox, with multiple wires running into the electrical panel below. 2 LED displays showed different readouts. One was a countdown timer showing 16 minutes and 37 seconds. The other appeared to be measuring electrical current flow. Sarah photographed the device from multiple angles, then keyed her radio. Found it. Basement electrical panel. The device is definitely connected to the building's power system, and there's a motion sensor on the front face. I count at least 12 wires running into the electrical panel. Can you disarm it? Sarah studied the device carefully. Morrison had been clever. The motion sensor would trigger if she tried to move the device, and the electrical connections meant that cutting building power would likely complete a secondary circuit. But there was something else, something that made her pause. On the side of the device, almost hidden among the wires and circuits, was a small metal plate engraved with numbers. 18 hours, 43 minutes, and 22 seconds. Rodriguez, what time did I disarm Morrison's device 3 years ago? I need the exact time from the case file. Hold on, pulling it up now. Case file shows you completed disarming procedures at 18 hours, 43 minutes, and 22 seconds military time. That's 6:43 p.m. and 22 seconds. The same numbers on the plate. Morrison wasn't just recreating the timeline of that day. He was recreating the exact moment of his defeat. Sarah realized that this wasn't just about revenge. This was about proving that he could beat her, that his planning could overcome her expertise. But, in his obsession with recreating that moment, Morrison had made a crucial mistake. He had built the device exactly like his previous one, with the same weaknesses, the same vulnerabilities. 3 years ago, Sarah had discovered that Morrison's device had a failsafe built into it. As an electrician, Morrison was terrified of electrical fires, and he had programmed his device to shut down if it detected electrical irregularities that might cause a building-wide electrical fire. It was an odd quirk for a man building a bomb, but it had been the key to safely disarming it. Sarah examined the current device more carefully. The second LED display wasn't just monitoring power flow, it was monitoring power quality. Morrison had recreated his original device completely, including the same electrical fire safety protocol that had been his downfall 3 years ago. Rodriguez, I need you to do something that's going to sound crazy. I need you to have someone create a controlled electrical surge in the building's main power supply. Nothing dangerous, just enough irregular voltage to trigger electrical safety protocols. Sarah, if that device is connected to the electrical system like you think, a power surge could detonate it immediately. Or it could shut it down completely. Morrison's an electrician, not a bomber. 3 years ago, his device had a built-in safety protocol to prevent electrical fires. If he's recreated that device exactly like I think he has, the same protocol should be in place. Sarah looked at her watch. 11 minutes remaining. Time was running out, and she was about to bet 200 lives on her memory of a case from 3 years ago. Rodriguez, I need that power surge now. Trust me. Through her radio, she could hear Rodriguez giving orders to the power company technician on site. Controlled surge in 30 seconds. Sarah, get clear of the device. Sarah backed away from the electrical panel, her eyes fixed on the device. Everything depended on Morrison's obsessive attention to detail, his need to prove he could recreate and perfect his original design. The lights in the basement flickered once, twice, then stabilized. On the device, the electrical monitor began flashing warning signals. For a moment that seemed to last forever, nothing happened. Then, with a soft electronic beep, the countdown timer stopped. The motion sensor light went dark. Morrison's device had shut itself down, just as it had 3 years ago. Sarah keyed her radio, her hands shaking slightly as the adrenaline began to fade. Device neutralized. Building is secure. Begin evacuation procedures. As she climbed the stairs back to the main floor, Sarah could hear the sounds of controlled evacuation beginning above. Teachers were calmly leading children out of the building, their voices reassuring and steady despite the danger that had just passed. Principal Hayes met her in the hallway, her face pale, but relieved. Is it over? It's over. The children are safe. As Sarah emerged from the building, she was greeted by the sight of 200 children and staff members safely evacuated, parents being reunited with their kids, and the organized chaos of a successful emergency response. The bomb had been neutralized, the building was secure, and everyone was going home. But, as she removed her protective gear and watched the scene unfold, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. Morrison had been captured trying to flee the city, but his device had been more sophisticated than anything he had built before. Someone had helped him, taught him, given him resources he shouldn't have had access to. Rodriguez approached her as she finished packing her equipment. Hell of a job in there, Chun. How did you know about the electrical safety protocol? Morrison's an electrician. He's afraid of electrical fires. It was a calculated risk based on his previous work. She paused, looking back at the school. But, Marcus, someone helped him build that device. It was too advanced for his skill level, too sophisticated for someone working alone. We'll investigate. Right now, just be glad it's over. Sarah nodded. But, as she drove home through the now normal morning traffic, she couldn't escape the feeling that this had been a test. Morrison's device had been designed to challenge her specifically, to force her to remember and recreate her previous success. But why? What was the point of proving she could do it again? Her phone rang as she pulled into her driveway. Unknown number. Sarah Chun. Congratulations on your successful disarmament today. The voice was electronically distorted, impossible to identify. You performed exactly as predicted. Who is this? Someone who's been watching your career with great interest. Morrison was simply a test, Miss Chun. We needed to see how you operate under pressure, how you think when lives are at stake. You've passed with flying colors. 3 days passed in deceptive normalcy. Sarah returned to her regular duties, processing routine calls and training new recruits. The media attention from the school incident had died down, and life seemed to be returning to normal. But the mysterious phone call haunted her thoughts, especially during the quiet moments between emergency responses. On Friday evening, as she was leaving headquarters after a long shift, Sarah noticed something different about her car. A small envelope was tucked under the windshield wiper, placed with the precision of someone who wanted it to be found but not obviously seen by casual observers. The envelope contained a single sheet of paper with an address and a time, 12:47, Riverside Drive, Warehouse District, 11:30 p.m. tonight. Come alone. No backup, no surveillance. If you want answers about who's been watching you, this is your only chance. Sarah stared at the paper for a long moment. Every instinct screamed that this was a trap, that she should immediately contact Rodriguez and set up proper surveillance. But the same instincts told her that whoever had orchestrated the school incident was operating far beyond Morrison's capabilities, and traditional police procedures might not be effective. She made a calculated decision that went against all her training. At 11:15 p.m., Sarah drove alone to the warehouse district. The area was exactly what she expected: abandoned industrial buildings, broken streetlights, and the kind of pervasive darkness that swallowed sound and movement. Warehouse 1247 stood between two condemned factories, its windows boarded up and its loading dock sealed with rusted metal sheets. But, as Sarah approached, she noticed subtle signs that the building wasn't as abandoned as it appeared. The lock on the main door was new, disguised to look old but clearly recently installed. Fresh tire tracks in the alley suggested regular traffic despite the building's abandoned appearance. The door opened before she could knock. "Ms. Chun, thank you for coming." The man who greeted her was not what she had expected. He appeared to be in his 50s, well-dressed in an expensive suit, with the kind of calm confidence that suggested military or intelligence background. "I'm Dr. Marcus Webb, and I have a proposition that will change your life." Dr. Webb. That name's familiar. Sarah kept her hand near her concealed weapon as she entered the warehouse. The interior had been converted into a sophisticated operations center, with computers, communication equipment, and detailed maps covering every surface. "You're the former military strategist who disappeared after the Pentagon consulting scandal 5 years ago." Disappeared is such a dramatic word. I prefer to say I found more meaningful work. Webb led her deeper into the space, where Sarah could see at least 6 other people working at various stations. All appeared to be highly trained professionals, and all looked up as she passed, clearly having been briefed about her arrival. What kind of meaningful work involves testing bomb technicians with fake terrorist threats? Webb smiled, but there was no humor in it. The kind that prevents real terrorist threats from becoming reality. "Ms. Chun, what do you know about the Prometheus Protocol?" The name meant nothing to Sarah, but the way Webb said it suggested she should recognize it. "Never heard of it." Not surprising. It's classified at levels most government employees never see. The Prometheus Protocol is a federal program designed to identify and recruit individuals with exceptional crisis responsibilities. People who can think beyond conventional parameters when lives are at stake. Webb gestured to a wall covered with photographs and case files. Sarah recognized some of the faces: a fire captain from Seattle, a trauma surgeon from Chicago, a Coast Guard rescue swimmer from Alaska. All were people who had gained media attention for their extraordinary actions during emergency situations. Every person on that wall has faced an impossible situation and found an unconventional solution. They've all demonstrated the ability to break rules, ignore protocol, and improvise under extreme pressure. They're exactly the kind of people we need for situations that conventional emergency response can't handle. And Morrison was a convenient test case. His desire for revenge provided us with the perfect scenario to evaluate your capabilities under controlled conditions. We knew his psychological profile, understood his methods, and could predict his actions with reasonable accuracy. We also knew that you would be able to disarm his device because you had done it before. Sarah felt a surge of anger. "You used 200 children as bait for your recruitment test?" "We ensured their safety throughout the process. Multiple fail-safes were in place, and Morrison never had the capability to actually harm anyone. His device was modified by our technical team to ensure that regardless of your actions, it would not detonate." "But I didn't know that. I believe those children were in real danger." "Which is exactly why your performance was authentic." "Ms. Chun, we need people who will act with genuine urgency when lives are at stake, not people who know they're participating in a simulation." Webb moved to a computer terminal and pulled up a detailed file. Sarah's photograph was prominently displayed, along with a comprehensive record of her career, training, psychological evaluations, and personal background. 6 years as a bomb disposal specialist. 43 successful disarmaments without a single failure. Consistently rated as exceptional in high-pressure decision-making. Demonstrated willingness to break protocol when conventional methods are insufficient. No family dependencies, minimal personal relationships, excellent physical and psychological health. You're exactly what we're looking for. For what? Situations that official government agencies can't handle openly. Terrorist threats that require unofficial responses. Crisis scenarios where traditional military or law enforcement involvement would create political complications. Webb closed the file and turned to face her directly. We're talking about preventing disasters before they happen, Miss Chun. Stopping threats that could kill thousands of people, but using methods that no government agency could ever officially sanction. Sarah studied the operation around her. The equipment was clearly military-grade. The personnel were obviously highly trained, and the resources suggested funding from sources with very deep pockets. This wasn't a rogue operation run by conspiracy theorists. This was a sophisticated organization with serious capabilities. Who funds this? Who do you work for? People who understand that sometimes saving lives requires operating outside official channels. Our funding comes from private sources who prefer to remain anonymous, but who have strong interests in preventing large-scale terrorist incidents. Meaning we work for people who lose money when cities get blown up, Ms. Chun. Insurance companies, multinational corporations, investment groups. People who understand that prevention is cheaper than reconstruction. Webb led her to a conference room where detailed maps and photographs covered a large table. Let me show you what we're currently facing. The images showed what appeared to be chemical storage facilities, nuclear power plants, and major transportation hubs. Red marks indicated potential targets, and detailed threat assessments accompanied each location. Intelligence indicates that a sophisticated terrorist organization is planning multiple coordinated attacks on critical infrastructure targets within the next 6 months. The attacks are being planned by individuals with advanced technical knowledge, significant financial resources, and access to materials that could cause catastrophic damage. Why isn't this being handled by the FBI or Homeland Security? Because the intelligence we've gathered was obtained through methods that wouldn't be admissible in court. Because the targets are in multiple countries, requiring coordination that official agencies can't achieve quickly enough. And because the individuals involved have connections that make conventional law enforcement approaches politically complicated. Webb pulled out a thick folder and placed it in front of Sarah. This is your first assignment, should you choose to accept it. Chemical storage facility outside Philadelphia. Our intelligence suggests that an attack is being planned for some time within the next 3 weeks. The attack would involve compromising the facility's safety systems and causing a release of chlorine gas that could affect a population area of over 500,000 people. Sarah opened the folder and immediately understood the complexity of the situation. The facility was privately owned, but contracted to store chemicals for government defense projects. An official investigation would require warrants that would alert the potential attackers. Traditional surveillance would be limited by jurisdictional issues. Military involvement would create political problems. What exactly would you need me to do? Infiltrate the facility, assess their current security systems, identify vulnerabilities that could be exploited by attackers, and develop countermeasures that would prevent a successful attack. You would be working undercover as a safety consultant, giving you legitimate access to all critical systems. And if I find evidence of an imminent attack, you stop it, using whatever methods are necessary. No bureaucracy, no committee meetings, no political considerations. Just you, your expertise, and whatever resources we can provide. Sarah studied the details of the assignment. The chemical facility housed enough chlorine gas to create a toxic cloud that could travel for miles under the right weather conditions. The death toll from a successful attack could be massive, and the economic impact would be devastating. How do I know you're telling the truth? How do I know this isn't another test, another recruitment scenario? Webb pulled out a tablet and showed her real-time intelligence reports. Because, Ms. Chun, the people we're tracking don't use recycled electricians with grudges. They're professionals with access to military-grade explosives and sophisticated chemical knowledge. They're planning something that will make the school incident look like a training exercise. The reports showed surveillance footage of individuals conducting reconnaissance at various chemical facilities, intercepted communications discussing target vulnerabilities, and financial transactions indicating the purchase of materials that could be used for chemical weapons attacks. This is real intelligence. As real as it gets. Ms. Chun, in the past 6 months, we've prevented 4 major attacks using methods that official agencies couldn't employ. a shopping mall in Denver, a water treatment plant in Phoenix, a subway system in Boston, and a hospital complex in Miami. Each time, our people were able to act quickly and decisively because they weren't constrained by bureaucratic procedures. Webb showed her additional files detailing these previous operations. The evidence was compelling. Sophisticated attack plans that had been interrupted at the last moment by interventions that appeared to be accidents or security upgrades, but were actually precisely planned countermeasures. What happened to the attackers? Some were arrested by local authorities on unrelated charges. Some suffered accidents that prevented them from carrying out their plans. Some simply found that their targets had become too difficult to attack successfully. We prefer prevention to confrontation whenever possible. Sarah realized that she was being offered something that appealed to every aspect of her professional identity. The chance to prevent mass casualties, to use her skills without bureaucratic constraints, to work with cutting-edge resources and support systems. But she was also being asked to operate completely outside official oversight, to trust people whose true identities and motivations she didn't fully understand. I need time to think about this. Unfortunately, time is something we don't have much of. The Philadelphia facility intelligence suggests that reconnaissance is already complete and the attack planning is in final stages. We need someone inside that facility within 48 hours. Webb handed her a secure phone and a briefcase containing detailed facility blueprints and security assessments. Ms. Chun, I understand your hesitation. What we're asking you to do goes against everything you've been trained to believe about proper procedures and official channels. But sometimes proper procedures aren't enough to save lives. And if I say no, then you go back to your regular duties, and we find someone else. But, Ms. Chun, we've spent 2 years identifying and evaluating candidates for this position. You're not just our first choice. You're the only person we've found who has both the technical skills and the psychological profile for this kind of work. Sarah looked around the operations center one more time. Despite her reservations about their methods, these people were clearly dedicated to preventing terrorist attacks. Their resources and capabilities far exceeded anything available to traditional law enforcement, and their track record suggested they were effective at stopping threats before they materialized. If I agree to this, what guarantees do I have about support and resources? Complete support. Whatever you need, whenever you need it. Equipment, intelligence, backup, extraction if things go wrong. You won't be operating alone, Ms. Chun. You'll be part of a team that includes some of the most capable crisis response specialists in the world. Webb showed her personnel files for the other team members. The fire captain from Seattle had prevented a massive industrial explosion by improvising cooling techniques that weren't in any manual. The trauma surgeon from Chicago had saved dozens of lives during a mass casualty event by setting up field medical facilities in ways that violated standard procedures but dramatically improved survival rates. These people understand what it means to break rules when lives are at stake. They understand that sometimes the greatest good requires actions that can't be justified through normal channels. Sarah made her decision. I'll do it. But I want full intelligence on what we're facing, complete honesty about the risks, and your guarantee that if this goes wrong, you'll make sure my actions are justified through official channels. Done. Webb extended his hand. Welcome to the Prometheus Protocol, Ms. Chun. Your assignment briefing begins in 1 hour. As Sarah shook Webb's hand, she realized that her life had just changed completely. She was no longer a city bomb technician responding to emergency calls. She was now part of something much larger, much more dangerous, and potentially much more important than anything she had ever done. The briefing room filled with additional personnel as Webb prepared to provide detailed intelligence about the Philadelphia chemical facility and the terrorist threat they were facing. Maps, photographs, technical specifications, and threat assessments covered every surface. The facility stores approximately 40,000 tons of chlorine gas in pressurized containers. Webb began. A coordinated attack on their safety systems could release enough gas to create a toxic cloud covering roughly 200 square miles under optimal weather conditions. Sarah studied the facility layouts and security assessments. What makes you think an attack is imminent? Increased surveillance activity in the past 2 weeks. Intercepted communications discussing target timing, and the recent acquisition of specialized equipment that would be needed to compromise chemical storage systems. Webb pulled up surveillance footage showing individuals photographing the facility from multiple angles. These people have been conducting detailed reconnaissance, and their level of sophistication suggests they have inside knowledge of chemical facility operations. Inside knowledge. Someone with access to facility blueprints, security procedures, and chemical storage protocols. Possibly a current or former employee, possibly someone with connections to the chemical industry. We're dealing with people who understand exactly how to cause maximum damage with minimum effort. The scope of the threat was becoming clear. This wasn't a crude attack planned by amateurs. It was a sophisticated operation designed by people who understood industrial chemical systems and had the resources to exploit vulnerabilities that most people wouldn't even recognize. Your cover identity has been established as Dr. Sarah Mitchell, chemical safety consultant brought in to conduct a routine security assessment, Webb continued. You'll have complete access to all facility systems, including storage areas, control rooms, and safety protocols. How long do I have? Intelligence suggests the attack will occur within the next 2 weeks, possibly coordinated with weather patterns that would maximize the spread of any chemical release. You need to be inside that facility by Monday morning. Sarah looked at the clock. It was already past midnight Friday. She had less than 3 days to prepare for an undercover assignment that could prevent a disaster affecting 500,000 people. What support do I have? Complete technical support, real-time intelligence updates, and immediate extraction capability if your cover is compromised. You'll also have a partner. Webb gestured toward a woman who had been working at one of the computer stations. Meet Dr. Lisa Park, chemical engineer and former Army chemical weapons specialist. She'll be working inside the facility as your technical assistant. Dr. Park approached and extended her hand. I've been studying. This Monday morning arrived gray and cold, with the kind of industrial haze that made the chemical storage facility outside Philadelphia look even more ominous than the intelligence photos had suggested. Sarah, now operating under her cover identity as Dr. Sarah Mitchell, sat in the passenger seat of a rented sedan as Dr. Lisa Park navigated the facility's security checkpoint. Remember, we're here to conduct a routine safety assessment, Park said quietly as they approached the guard station. Nothing urgent, nothing that suggests we're looking for specific threats. Just 2 consultants doing their job. The guard who checked their identification was thorough but not suspicious. Their cover credentials had been crafted with the kind of detail that only a sophisticated intelligence operation could provide. Dr. Sarah Mitchell existed in every database that might be checked, with a complete professional history, educational background, and consulting track record. Dr. Mitchell and Dr. Park to see Facility Manager Harrison, Sarah told the guard, maintaining the professional demeanor she had practiced during the weekend briefing sessions. The facility was larger than she had expected. Massive storage tanks dominated the landscape, connected by a maze of pipes, monitoring systems, and safety equipment. Chlorine gas in these quantities required extensive safety protocols, and any compromise of those systems could have catastrophic consequences. Facility Manager James Harrison met them at the main office building, a stocky man in his 50s with the kind of nervous energy that suggested he was not entirely comfortable with outside consultants examining his operation. Dr. Mitchell, Dr. Park, welcome to Riverside Chemical Storage. I have to say, this assessment seems to have been scheduled rather suddenly. Usually we get more advance notice for these kinds of inspections. The state regulatory agency has been updating safety requirements for facilities handling Class 2 hazardous materials, Sarah replied smoothly. Our assessment is part of ensuring your facility meets the new standards before they become mandatory. It was a plausible cover story, backed by actual regulatory changes that Webb's team had researched extensively. Harrison seemed to accept the explanation, though his continued nervousness suggested other concerns. Well, I suppose we should get started. Let me give you the tour and show you our safety systems. As they walked through the facility, Sarah's trained eye automatically cataloged potential vulnerabilities. The chlorine storage tanks were massive, each containing enough gas to create a toxic cloud that could kill thousands of people under the right conditions. The control systems appeared modern and sophisticated, but every safety system had weaknesses that could be exploited by someone with the right knowledge. Our monitoring systems track pressure, temperature, and gas flow in real time, Harrison explained as they entered the main control room. Any deviation from normal parameters triggers automatic safety protocols. Sarah studied the control panels and computer systems carefully. The facility was indeed well protected against accidental releases, but the same systems that provided safety could potentially be turned into weapons if someone could compromise them from inside. Who has access to these control systems? She asked. Only senior technicians with appropriate security clearance. All access is logged and monitored. Harrison pulled up personnel records on a computer terminal. We currently have 8 technicians qualified to operate these systems. Park moved to examine the physical security measures while Sarah continued questioning Harrison about personnel and procedures. Their cover story allowed them to ask detailed questions about exactly the kinds of information that terrorists would need to plan an attack. Have you had any recent personnel changes? New employees, departures, changes in security clearance? Actually, we did have one technician leave rather suddenly, about 3 months ago. Gary Morrison worked here for 12 years before he resigned with only 2 weeks' notice. Said he had found a better opportunity elsewhere. Sarah's blood went cold. Morrison, the same name as the electrician who had targeted her at the school. It couldn't be a coincidence. Do you have his employment records? I'd like to review them as part of the assessment. Harrison seemed hesitant. Well, I suppose that's within the scope of your review. Let me pull his file. Gary Morrison's employee file revealed exactly what Sarah had feared. 12 years as a senior chemical technician, with complete access to all facility systems and detailed knowledge of safety protocols. His personnel photograph showed a man who bore a strong family resemblance to David Morrison, the electrician from the school incident. Mr. Harrison, did Gary Morrison have any family members who might have had knowledge of his work here? I believe he mentioned having a brother, but I never met him. Why do you ask? Sarah exchanged glances with Park. They had found their connection between the school incident and the current threat. David Morrison's revenge hadn't been personal. It had been a test run for something much larger, planned with help from his brother who had inside knowledge of chemical facility operations. Just standard background review. Can I get a copy of Mr. Morrison's work assignments for his last 6 months of employment? The records showed that Gary Morrison had worked extensively on the facility's safety systems during his final months, ostensibly upgrading and maintaining critical equipment. But with his subsequent disappearance and his brother's terrorist attack, those upgrades looked much more sinister. I need to inspect the specific systems that Mr. Morrison worked on during his last 6 months, Sarah told Harrison. Can you provide me with detailed schematics and access to those areas? Of course, but may I ask why you're focusing on his work specifically? Sarah had to be careful not to reveal the true nature of her investigation. Part of our assessment involves reviewing any recent system modifications to ensure they comply with updated safety standards. Mr. Morrison's upgrades represent the most recent changes to your critical systems. Harrison led them to the main chemical storage area, where the massive chlorine tanks were connected to a complex network of pipes, valves, and monitoring equipment. Sarah could immediately see signs of recent modifications, new control boxes, updated wiring, and monitoring equipment that appeared newer than the surrounding systems. Mr. Morrison upgraded most of these safety systems during his last 3 months with us, Harrison explained. He said the improvements would provide better monitoring and faster emergency response capabilities. Park knelt beside one of the new control boxes and began examining its wiring with the specialized equipment they had brought. After several minutes, she looked up at Sarah with an expression that confirmed their worst fears. Dr. Mitchell, could I speak with you privately for a moment? They stepped away from Harrison, moving to a location where their conversation wouldn't be overheard. The modifications aren't safety upgrades, Park said quietly. They're remote access systems. Someone with the right equipment could control these safety systems from outside the facility. Can you tell how recently they were installed? Based on the wiring and components, probably within the last 6 months. And, Sarah, there's something else. The remote access capability isn't just for monitoring. Someone could actually trigger a controlled release of chlorine gas by compromising these systems remotely. The scope of the threat was becoming clear. Gary Morrison had spent months installing backdoors into the facility's safety systems, creating vulnerabilities that could be exploited to cause exactly the kind of catastrophic chemical release that intelligence had warned about. Can we disable these systems without alerting whoever might be monitoring them? Not easily. If these systems are being monitored remotely, any obvious tampering would be detected immediately. We need to find out more about how they work and who might have access to them. Sarah made a decision that went against every protocol she had ever learned. We're going to have to let the attack proceed far enough to identify the attackers, then stop it at the last possible moment. That's incredibly dangerous. If we miscalculate the timing, or if there are backup systems we haven't identified, this entire facility could be compromised. But if we just disable these systems now, the attackers will disappear and try again somewhere else. This might be our only chance to stop them permanently. They returned to Harrison, who was becoming visibly more nervous as their inspection continued. Mr. Harrison, I need you to understand that your facility may be facing a serious security threat. I can't give you all the details, but these system modifications that Gary Morrison installed aren't what they appear to be. Harrison's face went pale. Are you saying Gary sabotaged our safety systems? I'm saying that someone with detailed knowledge of your facility has created vulnerabilities that could be exploited by hostile parties. We need to work together to identify and neutralize these threats without alerting anyone who might be monitoring your systems. Should I contact the authorities? The FBI? Homeland Security? Not yet. If this facility is under surveillance, any obvious security changes could trigger an immediate attack. We need to handle this carefully and quietly. Sarah pulled out the secure phone Webb had given her and stepped away to make a call. Within seconds, she was connected to the operations center. This is Mitchell. We've confirmed the threat. Gary Morrison installed remote access capabilities throughout the facility's safety systems. Someone could trigger a chlorine release from outside the facility. Understood. What do you need? Electronic surveillance equipment to track any remote access attempts, technical support to understand how Morrison's modifications work, and a plan for stopping an attack without triggering a larger release. Equipment will be delivered within 2 hours under cover of additional consulting materials. Technical support is standing by. Sarah, be aware that our intelligence suggests the attack may be imminent. Recent communications traffic indicates heightened activity among the suspected terrorist cell. Sarah returned to Park and Harrison. We're going to receive additional equipment this afternoon that will help us monitor these systems and detect any unauthorized access attempts. In the meantime, we need to continue our inspection as if nothing unusual has been discovered. The next several hours were tense as they methodically examined every system that Gary Morrison had modified. The scope of his sabotage was extensive. Remote access capabilities had been installed on pressure release valves, temperature monitors, chemical flow controls, and emergency shutdown systems. Someone with the right equipment could potentially control every aspect of the facility's chemical storage operations. By late afternoon, Webb's technical support team had arrived disguised as additional consulting personnel. Their sophisticated electronic monitoring equipment was concealed within what appeared to be standard safety assessment tools. We're detecting active remote monitoring of this facility's systems, the lead technician reported quietly. Someone is definitely watching these modified control systems in real time. Can you trace the source? Working on it, but the signal is being routed through multiple proxy servers and encrypted connections. Whoever set this up knows what they're doing. As evening approached, Sarah realized they were facing a classic no-win scenario. They couldn't disable Morrison's sabotage without alerting the attackers, but allowing the attack to proceed risked a catastrophic chemical release that could kill thousands of people. Dr. Park, can we create fake control signals that would make the attackers think their sabotage is working while actually maintaining safe operations? Possibly. If we can understand exactly how Morrison's systems interface with the facility's controls, we might be able to create a buffer layer that intercepts hostile commands and replaces them with safe ones. How long would that take? Several hours, maybe more. And we need complete access to all modified systems simultaneously to ensure we don't miss anything. Sarah looked at her watch. According to intelligence estimates, the attack could happen at any time. They were running out of options and running out of time. Mr. Harrison, I need you to authorize a facility-wide safety system inspection tonight. We'll need access to all areas, all systems, and we'll need your maintenance staff to assist us. Tonight? That's highly irregular. Our insurance policies require advance notice for major system inspections. Mr. Harrison, if we don't do this tonight, there might not be a facility left to inspect tomorrow morning. The gravity of her words seemed to finally convince Harrison that this was not a routine safety assessment. What exactly are we dealing with here? Terrorists who want to turn your facility into a weapon that could kill 500,000 people. And we have maybe 12 hours to stop them. As night fell over the chemical storage facility, Sarah and her team began the most dangerous and complex operation of their careers. They were racing against time to neutralize sabotage systems installed by someone with intimate knowledge of chemical facility operations, while simultaneously trying to identify and locate the terrorists who planned to exploit those vulnerabilities. The stakes could not have been higher. Success meant preventing a of the attack began at 2:47 a.m., while Sarah and her team were still working to install bypass systems on Gary Morrison's sabotaged equipment. The first indication was a soft alarm from the electronic monitoring station, followed immediately by urgent warnings from the facility's control room. Unauthorized remote access detected, the technician announced. Someone's attempting to override pressure release protocols on tanks 7 through 12. Sarah's blood turned to ice. Tanks 7 through 12 contained nearly half of the facility's chlorine gas reserves. A coordinated release from those tanks would create a toxic cloud large enough to reach the Philadelphia suburbs. Dr. Park, status on the bypass systems. Only about 60% complete. We've got tanks 1 through 6 protected, but 7 through 12 are still vulnerable to remote override. Sarah moved quickly to the main control room, where Harrison and his night shift supervisor were staring at their monitoring screens in growing panic. Red warning lights were flashing across the control panels as the facility's safety systems detected unauthorized access attempts. Mr. Harrison, I need you to implement immediate emergency protocols. Begin controlled venting of tanks 7 through 12 to reduce pressure levels. If someone succeeds in compromising the release valves, lower pressure will minimize the volume of gas that could be released. That's going to require manual override of multiple safety systems. If something goes wrong during the venting process, if we don't do it now, those tanks are going to be compromised anyway. At least this way we maintain some control over the release rate. As Harrison began implementing emergency venting procedures, Sarah contacted the operations center through her secure phone. This is Mitchell. The attack has begun. Remote override attempts on tanks 7 through 12. We need immediate technical support and emergency response coordination. Understood. We're tracking the same remote access attempts. Electronic warfare team is working to disrupt their communications, but the attackers are using multiple redundant connection methods. What about backup? Emergency response teams are standing by, but, Sarah, if this facility releases significant quantities of chlorine gas, there's no evacuation protocol that could protect the affected population. You have to stop this from inside. Sarah realized that she and her small team were the only thing standing between normal Tuesday morning and one of the worst industrial disasters in American history. The weight of that responsibility was staggering, but there was no time for doubt or hesitation. Dr. Park, can we accelerate installation of the remaining bypass systems? Not without shutting down the affected tanks completely, which would trigger automatic safety protocols that the attackers might be monitoring. If they realize we're actively countering their attack, they might escalate to more drastic measures. What kind of more drastic measures? Park's expression was grim. Physical attack on the facility. If they can't compromise the systems remotely, they might try to damage the storage tanks directly. As if summoned by her words, Harrison's security radio crackled to life. Mr. Harrison, we've got movement detected along the perimeter fence in Sector 4. Looks like multiple individuals approaching the tank farm. Sarah felt the situation spiraling beyond their ability to control it. Remote attacks on the facility's computer systems, potential physical assault on the storage tanks, and half-completed countermeasures that might not be sufficient to prevent disaster. Mr. Harrison, contact local law enforcement and request immediate response to the perimeter breach. Tell them it's a potential terrorist attack on critical infrastructure. What about the remote system attacks? We handle those ourselves. Sarah turned to Park. How long do we need to complete the bypass systems on the remaining tanks? At least 2 hours, maybe more. And that's assuming the attackers don't realize what we're doing and try to overwhelm our countermeasures. Sarah made a decision that went against every principle of conventional emergency response. We're going to split up. Dr. Park, continue working on the bypass systems. I'm going to deal with the physical security threat. Sarah, you're not equipped for combat operations. If there are multiple attackers with military weapons, then I'll have to improvise. Just like I did at the school, just like I've done every time someone's tried to turn innocent people into casualties for their cause. Sarah gathered what equipment she could from their consulting supplies. A portable radio, her personal flashlight, basic tools, and the small sidearm she carried under her cover identity. It wasn't much against potentially well-armed terrorists, but it was what she had to work with. The tank farm was a maze of massive storage containers connected by pipes, catwalks, and maintenance platforms. In the darkness, it provided excellent cover for anyone trying to approach the critical infrastructure without being detected by perimeter security cameras. Sarah moved carefully through the industrial landscape, using her knowledge of the facility layout to predict where attackers might try to access the most vulnerable systems. If she were planning a physical assault on the chlorine storage tanks, she would target the main pressure relief systems or the primary distribution manifolds. Her radio crackled with updates from the control room. Dr. Mitchell, we're still detecting ongoing remote access attempts. The attackers seem to be probing different systems, looking for vulnerabilities we might have missed. Any success with their override attempts? Not so far, but they're being very methodical. It's like they have detailed knowledge of our safety protocols and are testing each system individually. Which, Sarah realized, they probably did. Gary Morrison had worked at this facility for 12 years. He would have intimate knowledge of every safety system, every emergency protocol, every potential vulnerability. He had probably provided his terrorist contacts with detailed blueprints for both physical and electronic attacks. A sound from the direction of Tank 7 caught her attention. Metal scraping against metal, too regular to be wind or thermal expansion. Someone was climbing the external access ladder that led to the tank's main pressure relief system. Sarah moved carefully in that direction, using the maze of pipes and equipment to conceal her approach. As she got closer, she could see two figures working on the tank's external controls. They appeared to be installing some kind of device on the pressure relief valve assembly. Her radio offered a tactical channel for communication with Park and the control room. I've located two individuals tampering with the pressure relief systems on Tank 7. They're installing some kind of external device. Can you see what kind of device? Sarah moved closer, using the tank's massive bulk to screen her approach. The device the attackers were installing appeared to be a small explosive charge positioned to damage the pressure relief valve in a way that would cause uncontrolled gas release. Explosive charges designed to compromise the pressure relief valves. If they succeed, Tank 7 would release its entire contents directly into the atmosphere. That's enough chlorine gas to create a toxic cloud covering at least 50 square miles. Sarah realized that she had to act immediately. The attackers were working methodically, suggesting they had practiced this procedure. If they completed their installation and moved to the other tanks, the facility could become an uncontrollable source of chemical weapons. But she was one person with minimal equipment facing at least two individuals who appeared to be well-trained and well-equipped. Any direct confrontation would likely end badly for her and leave the facility defenseless. Instead, Sarah decided to use her knowledge of the facility's systems to create a different kind of intervention. Dr. Park, can you trigger a controlled pressure release from Tank 7? Just enough to create noise and visible venting that would make the attackers think their device is already working. That's risky. If the pressure release interacts with their explosive device in an unexpected way. Right now, they're installing charges that will release the entire contents of Tank 7 into the atmosphere. A controlled release might convince them that their job is already done and cause them to move away from the tank. Give me 2 minutes to set up the controlled release sequence. Sarah maintained visual contact with the attackers while Park prepared the diversionary pressure release. The two figures continued working methodically on their explosive device, apparently unaware that they were being observed. Suddenly, Tank 7 erupted in a controlled hiss of venting gas. Emergency lights activated around the tank as the facility's safety systems responded to the pressure change. For a moment, the attackers froze, apparently uncertain whether their device had triggered prematurely. Then, one of them spoke into a radio, and Sarah realized they were coordinating with the team conducting the electronic attacks. If they confirmed that the pressure release was a defensive measure rather than a successful attack, they would resume their work and possibly accelerate their timeline. Dr. Park, we need to simulate a more significant malfunction. Can you trigger emergency warnings that would suggest Tank 7 is experiencing a catastrophic failure? I can activate the evacuation alarms for the Tank 7 sector. That should create enough chaos to convince them that their attack is succeeding. As the evacuation alarms began wailing across the tank farm, Sarah saw the attackers responding exactly as she had hoped. They gathered their equipment and began moving away from Tank 7, apparently convinced that they had successfully compromised it. But instead of leaving the facility, they were moving toward Tank 8, clearly intending to continue their attack on additional storage units. Sarah keyed her radio for the control room. Mr. Harrison, I need you to simulate system failures on Tanks 8 and 9. Make it look like the entire tank farm is experiencing cascade failures. Dr. Mitchell, if I trigger false emergency protocols across multiple tanks, we might lose the ability to distinguish between real and simulated problems. If something actually goes wrong, Mr. Harrison, something is already going wrong. We've got terrorists installing explosive charges on our chlorine storage tanks. Right now, confusion is our best defense. As emergency alarms spread across the facility, Sarah could see the attackers changing their strategy. Instead of methodically working on individual tanks, they were now moving quickly toward what appeared to be a central control junction where multiple tank systems interconnected. She realized with growing horror that they had a backup plan. If they couldn't compromise individual tanks, they were going to attack the central distribution system that could affect multiple tanks simultaneously. Dr. Park, the attackers are moving toward the main distribution manifold. If they compromise that system, they could potentially affect all 12 tanks from a single point of attack. Sarah, you have to stop them before they reach that junction. Sarah found herself in the position she had trained for her entire career but hoped never to face: a direct confrontation with armed individuals who were determined to cause mass casualties. She had minutes, possibly less, to prevent them from accessing critical infrastructure that could turn the entire facility into a weapon. Moving as quickly as she dared through the maze of industrial equipment, Sarah tried to reach the distribution manifold before the attackers. But they had a head start and appeared to know the facility layout as well as she did. As she rounded a corner near the central junction, Sarah came face to face with both attackers. They were positioned at the main control panel for the distribution system, working to install what appeared to be a much larger explosive device than the charges they had been placing on individual tanks. For a moment, all three of them froze in mutual surprise. Then, one of the attackers reached for what appeared to be a weapon while the other continued working on their device. Sarah reacted with the split-second decision-making that had defined her career. Instead of trying to engage them directly, she aimed her flashlight at the most sensitive part of their explosive device and triggered the high-intensity strobe function. The sudden, brilliant light apparently triggered a photoelectric sensor in their device, because it immediately began emitting warning beeps that suggested an activation sequence had started. Both attackers dove for cover as their own device began what they apparently thought was a premature detonation sequence. In the confusion, Sarah was able to reach the main control panel and begin implementing emergency shutdown procedures that would isolate the distribution manifold from the individual storage tanks. Dr. Park, I'm at the main distribution control. The attackers triggered their own device prematurely. I'm implementing emergency isolation protocols now. Copy that. How much time do we have? Sarah looked at the device the attackers had been installing. It was larger and more sophisticated than the charges they had been placing on individual tanks, with digital timers and what appeared to be remote detonation capabilities. I don't know. Their device is still active, and I don't know if the isolation protocols will be sufficient if it detonates at this junction. She had perhaps minutes to either disarm a sophisticated explosive device or find a way to minimize its effects if it detonated. And somewhere in the facility, the electronic attacks on the control systems were still ongoing, adding another layer of danger to an already impossible situation. 6 minutes. Sarah stared at the digital timer, counting down on the sophisticated explosive device attached to the main distribution manifold. Every protocol she had ever learned for bomb disposal screamed at her to evacuate the area and call for a full hazmat team. But 6 minutes wasn't enough time for evacuation, and there was no hazmat team equipped to deal with a potential chlorine gas release that could affect 500,000 people. The device was unlike anything she had encountered in her 6 years of bomb disposal. Multiple detonators, redundant triggering systems, and what appeared to be a dead man's switch that would activate if the device was moved or tampered with improperly. Gary Morrison's 12 years of experience at the facility had allowed him to design an attack that accounted for every conventional defense. Dr. Park, status on the isolation protocols? About 60% complete. The distribution manifold connections are more complex than I expected. If that device detonates before I can isolate all the tank connections, how much chlorine gas are we talking about? Potentially all 12 tanks simultaneously. That's enough gas to create a toxic cloud that could reach New York City under the right atmospheric conditions. Sarah studied the device more carefully, looking for any weakness or vulnerability that conventional bomb disposal might have missed. The construction was professional grade, with military specification components and sophisticated triggering mechanisms. But there was something familiar about the wiring pattern, something that reminded her of David Morrison's device from the school. Dr. Park, do you have the technical specifications for the device that David Morrison built for the school attack? Webb's team included those files in our briefing materials. Why? Because this device has some of the same wiring patterns. If Gary Morrison helped his brother build the school device, he might have incorporated similar design elements into this one. Sarah accessed the technical files through her secure tablet, comparing the wiring diagrams from David Morrison's school device with the explosive she was currently facing. The similarities were striking: the same type of safety circuits, the same redundant triggering systems, and, most importantly, the same kind of electrical fire prevention protocols that had been the key to disarming the school device. Dr. Park, I think Gary Morrison built the same electrical safety features into this device that his brother used at the school. If I can trigger an electrical irregularity in the distribution system, it might shut down the bomb automatically. Sarah, that's an incredible risk. If you're wrong about the safety protocols, an electrical surge could trigger immediate detonation. And, if I'm right, it could shut down the device without any explosion at all. Sarah looked at the timer for minutes and 37 seconds. Dr. Park, I need you to prepare a controlled electrical surge in the distribution system, just like we did at the school. Sarah, this isn't the school. We're not dealing with building electrical systems. We're dealing with industrial chemical storage infrastructure. An electrical surge here could cause problems we can't predict or control. But it's the same bomber psychology. Gary Morrison is an electrician, just like his brother. He's terrified of electrical fires, and he would have built safeguards into his device to prevent it from causing the kind of electrical disaster that could spread beyond his intended target. Through her radio, Sarah could hear increasing urgency in the facility control room. The remote electronic attacks were intensifying, with multiple systems being probed simultaneously. The attackers were escalating their efforts, possibly because they realized that their physical assault on the distribution manifold had been detected. Dr. Mitchell, we're losing control of multiple safety systems. Harrison's voice crackled through the radio. The remote attacks are overwhelming our defensive capabilities. Mr. Harrison, how quickly can you evacuate your staff from the facility? Full evacuation would take at least 20 minutes. But if we abandon the control systems now, there's no way to maintain safety protocols for the remaining storage tanks. Sarah realized they had reached the moment she had been dreading. She was going to have to make a decision that violated every principle of conventional emergency response, trusting her analysis of the bomber's psychology against the possibility of catastrophic failure. Dr. Park, begin preparing the electrical surge. Mr. Harrison, begin evacuating non-essential personnel, but maintain skeleton crew in the control room. If this works, we'll need people to manage the aftermath. If it doesn't work, we'll need people to coordinate emergency response for the largest industrial disaster in American history. Sarah, are you sure about this? Park's voice carried the weight of someone who understood exactly what was at stake. No, I'm not sure about anything. But, in 3 minutes, that device is going to detonate anyway, and we'll lose any chance of controlling the damage. At least this way, we're making a choice based on analysis rather than just hoping for the best. Sarah examined the device one more time, looking for any detail that might confirm or contradict her theory about the electrical safety protocols. The bomb was sophisticated, but it was also clearly the work of someone who approached problems like an electrician, methodical, redundant, and obsessed with preventing electrical fires. Dr. Park, I'm going to manually trigger the electrical safety protocols on the device itself. When I give the signal, implement the power surge through the distribution system. Manually trigger? Sarah, you're talking about directly manipulating an active explosive device. If you make a mistake, then we find out very quickly whether I understood Gary Morrison's psychology correctly. 2 minutes and 15 seconds remaining. Sarah could hear sirens in the distance as emergency responders began positioning themselves around the facility. But there was no emergency response protocol for this scenario. If the device detonated and compromised the chlorine storage systems, the responders would become additional casualties rather than sources of help. Using her basic toolkit, Sarah began carefully accessing the electrical components of the device. Every wire she touched could potentially trigger immediate detonation, but her analysis of the wiring patterns suggested that Gary Morrison had built the same kind of electrical fire safety features that his brother had used. Dr. Park, I've located what appears to be the electrical safety circuit. It's designed to shut down the device if it detects the kind of electrical irregularities that could cause building fires. How can you tell? Because it's exactly the same circuit design that David Morrison used in the school device. Gary Morrison helped his brother build that bomb, and he incorporated the same safety features into this one. 1 minute and 43 seconds remaining. Sarah positioned her tools to simultaneously access the safety circuit while Park prepared the electrical surge that would hopefully trigger the automatic shutdown sequence. Sarah, even if you're right about the safety circuit, we don't know if it will work the same way in this environment. Industrial electrical systems are completely different from building electrical systems, which is why we're going to find out in about 90 seconds whether improvisation and rule-breaking can save 500,000 lives. As the timer approached 1 minute remaining, Sarah realized that regardless of the outcome, this moment would define everything that followed. Either she would prevent one of the worst industrial disasters in American history, or she would become one of its first casualties. Dr. Park, on my mark, implement the electrical surge. 3, 2, 1 mark. Sarah triggered the electrical safety circuit at the exact moment that Park implemented the controlled power surge through the distribution system. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. The device continued counting down. 37 seconds, 36 seconds, 35 seconds. Then, with the same soft electronic beep that had marked the end of David Morrison's device at the school, the countdown timer stopped. The LED displays went dark. The detonation circuits shut down automatically, exactly as Sarah had predicted. Device neutralized, Sarah reported through her radio, her hands shaking as the adrenaline began to fade. Distribution manifold is secure. Copy that. Sarah, we're still detecting remote access attempts on the tank control systems. Dr. Park, status on the isolation protocols? Complete. All tanks are now isolated from potential remote override. The attackers can't access critical systems remotely anymore. As Sarah began the process of safely dismantling Gary Morrison's device, she reflected on how this crisis had been resolved through exactly the kind of unconventional thinking that Webb had recruited her for. Every rule of bomb disposal said that she should have evacuated the area and waited for specialists. Every protocol for chemical facility safety said that she should have implemented complete shutdown procedures and called for federal emergency response. But 500,000 lives didn't have time for conventional procedures. Sometimes saving lives required breaking rules, ignoring protocols, and trusting analysis over procedure. Her secure phone rang as she finished securing the dismantled device. Webb's voice carried a tone of satisfaction mixed with concern. Outstanding work, Sarah. Intelligence indicates that we've disrupted a terrorist cell that was planning similar attacks on chemical facilities in 3 other cities. Your success here prevented not just one disaster, but a coordinated campaign of chemical weapons attacks. What about Gary Morrison and his collaborators? Gary Morrison was arrested this morning trying to flee to Mexico. His electronic communications led us to the rest of his terrorist cell. All suspects are in custody, and we've secured detailed plans for attacks on chemical facilities in Houston, Detroit, and Seattle. And the remote attacks on this facility's systems? Completely shut down once we arrested the technical team coordinating the electronic assault. Sarah, you've prevented what would have been the deadliest terrorist attack in American history. As Sarah emerged from the chemical storage facility into the dawn light, she was greeted by the sight of emergency responders, news crews, and facility personnel who had no idea how close they had come to disaster. The official story would be a routine safety inspection that had discovered and corrected some technical problems. Sarah realized that once again, she was facing a scenario where conventional procedures wouldn't be sufficient. She was going to have to improvise, break rules, and trust her instincts to prevent a disaster that could affect 500,000 people. The timer on the attacker's device showed 6 minutes and counting down. Dr. Park, begin installing bypass systems on Morrison's control modifications, Sarah ordered. Technical team, maintain monitoring of all remote access attempts. If someone tries to trigger an attack while we're working, I need immediate notification. And if they do trigger an attack before we're ready, Sarah checked her equipment one final time. Then we improvise. And we hope that 18 minutes is enough time to save 500,000 lives. Facility for 2 weeks, learning every detail of their operations and security systems. If there are vulnerabilities that could be exploited, we'll find them. And if we find evidence of an imminent attack, then we stop it, Webb said simply. Whatever it takes, whatever methods are necessary. The only rule is that we prevent mass casualties. Sarah realized that she was about to undertake the most challenging assignment of her career, working with people she barely knew to prevent an attack by enemies whose identities she didn't understand. But as she looked at the detailed intelligence about the potential chlorine gas attack, she knew that the alternative was unacceptable. I'm ready, she said. Let's prevent a disaster. What do you want? Your skills, Ms. Chun. Your expertise. Your particular talent for thinking outside conventional parameters. You'll be hearing from us again very soon. The line went dead, leaving Sarah staring at her phone in the silence of her driveway. Morrison hadn't been the end of something. He had been the beginning. Someone had used him to test her abilities, to see how she would respond under pressure. As she sat in her car, Sarah realized that saving 200 lives that morning might have been the easy part. Whatever was coming next would be the real challenge.